Welcome to the Chef Server Technical AMA session.
I'm Mark Anderson. I've been with Chef about 9 years now. I've worked on Chef Server, Chef Backend, push jobs, but I would say most of my time some way involved with Chef Server.
And I'm Irving Popovetsky. I've only been at Chef for 5.5 years, so not quite Mark's length. But I've been involved in many of the largest Chef Server deployments in the world from an operations and kind of customer perspective. So today, this is an AMA session. We do want to take you through just a few quick slides, literally 4. And so just to talk about what's been going on with Chef Server, it's been about 3 years since there's been any kind of new presentation or technical training about Chef Server. So there's just a few things to catch up on. And then to talk a little bit about what's next. In the meantime, hopefully you're all formulating and ruminating on what difficult and challenging and exciting questions you're going to ask. Totally optional, but if you think of a question, you can also Google it to see if it's already answered. But totally optional, you don't have to, it's fine. Also, if your name is Lamont, please don't frame your questions in the form of a bug report. Anyone else, it's fine. Yeah. Cool. All right. Awesome. Let's get going. So let's go all the way back to 2016 because a lot of exciting things have happened to Chef Server since then. I think for many of us, one really exciting thing was that we finally got a solution to replace the old DRBD-based high availability mechanism in Chef Server. That was great. That was actually built and designed for the original hosted Chef architecture, which were physical machines that had a crossover cable, and that's a great way to run DRBD. But in VMs and in cloud environments, not so great. So Chef Backend was built throughout 2015 and launched in 2016, and that used native service replication for PostgreSQL and Elasticsearch to provide high availability services. And that's been a huge win for customers. Also, as a precursor to that work, the first thing that had to be done was to enable support for external databases in the Chef Server. Because again, the Chef Server was had a lot of configuration code that was hardwired for thinking that it managed the database and owned the service. And so peeling all that away required a good bit of work to first enable support for external services. That allowed things like the backend list topology of Chef Server, which was first pioneered by a customer who wanted to run it in AWS and use RDS and Amazon services. And later we ended up taking over kind of management and helping customers with doing that with the AWS native Chef Server. And then late in 2017, Chef Backend 2 was released. And that was a major component upgrade, especially for Elasticsearch. I think the original version was on Elasticsearch 2.x, and so I was upgrading it to 5.x, which was the latest and greatest at the time. That was kind of a hairy upgrade because it required a full cluster stop to do the upgrade. Another cool thing that we did, that we started in late 2017, was an effort to habitize the Chef Server. And so this was a cool effort that Mark and myself and a few of our coworkers were involved in, where we peeled back all of the old configuration code that was based on Chef and the application cookbook pattern, and instead we split all of the Chef Server services up into habitized components. And we even had one very specialized and bespoke customer deployment scenario where we shoved those into Docker containers and spun those up as well. This thing was really cool because it was a massive reduction in the complexity of how the thing operated and how to set it up. It started in less than a minute. It was amazing. But long term, it had a lot of operational challenges because it was kind of like throw it into your own container scheduler and you have to figure out how to wire it up. And one of the things that we learned in the process of that was that there's so much of running a multi-service Docker thing becomes tightly coupled with the container scheduler or container environment that you're running in, that it's almost impossible to decouple those. So as it builds up more and more, you really want to specialize on one and get really good at one, rather than just saying, here's a pile of Docker containers, figure out how to run them, because that doesn't create a great setup. And so we decided that from an operational perspective, it wasn't the kind of thing that we really want to popularize, but we learned a lot in the process. The other cool thing about that work of habitizing all the Chef server components is that the A2 development team, as they were working on some of their own things, were able to pull those components directly into A2. So there's a secret, well, it's not secret anymore because I'm now telling you all about it, but there's a secret undocumented flag that will be documented soon for Chef Automate called -- enable Chef server. And if you hit that, it enables all the Chef server APIs, which is now in production thanks to AWS OpsWorks that's running A2, and also the Chef Automate high availability solution that was announced yesterday also is using that as well.
So where are we going with Chef server? So the themes are basically simplifying the operating model. Once you start getting rid of things like DRB, DHA, Chef server really is a stateless app attached to somebody's Postgres and somebody's Elasticsearch. And how you get there, there's a bunch of different ways, whether it's Chef Backend, your cloud thing, A2. And so we're kind of focusing on trying to simplify that whole model to essentially get rid of a lot of cruft. There's some end-of-life components we're getting out of. So we got rid of PowerPC, which was a big block. Unfortunately, PowerPC had issues around getting OpenResty updated. So to be able to run on the latest of a lot of our pieces, we had to say goodbye to the PowerPC platform. Also, as we mentioned, the DRB-DHA is being ripped out. Major version numbers are the time when you get to do all this disposal of things that are holding you back. So a lot of what's going on in the near term is these cleanups, Chef reporting, Chef analytics. They're not all gone, but enough of it's gone to simplify a lot of our process. And yes, it's like everything else will be released with the licensing model that the rest of the Chef Infra product suite is having. We're also going to be releasing Push Jobs Server 3, Chef Backend, with similar licensing changes. So where we're thinking for Chef Server. The future of Chef Server we really see as being an Automate component of some fashion. The habitized model, Irving and I argued on just how much lines of code we reduced, but it's huge. It is a dramatic simplification of the process. Whether it's 3x or more, I don't know how to say that, but it's huge. The operability in terms of things like we were able to rekey in seconds the entire system using Habitat. Spin-ups are super fast. It's just a really beautiful model to work in. And Automate provides us the infrastructure around upgrades and operations that will let us, the missing piece from when we did the Docker part comes through Automate. So we're going to take advantage of that. And now with Automate being open source, there's a lot of opportunities for integration into Automate. Places we're talking about are things around the auth-z mechanism. Automate has what I think is a cleaner authorization mechanism than we currently have. Integrate that. There's opportunities to improve things like how we integrate with LDAP and that sort of stuff. And just a lot of other more tightly coupling opportunities. Where something needs to be built will land where it makes sense rather than whether, is this a proprietary component or is this open source? There's not going to be this kind of artificial forcing function on how we build stuff. That being said, Omnibus Chef is not going away anytime soon. We're going to keep on building it. We're going to keep on supporting it. I will say that Chef Server 12, we're going to end of life it. Well, 2020 sounds far away, but the future arrives fast. The other part of this is the open sourcing, the way we're rechanging things, gives us some opportunities. We're rebooting our open source model. We've ended up with, I don't know, 4 or 5 different practices around open source inside the company. We are kind of refreshing that. So there will be, we've been not as good about responding to issues and pull requests as we really like to be. And so we're going to be much more systematic and running. Sometime next week, we'll be announcing the scheduling of a triage session where we'll go through pull request issues, and actually you can join, it'll be an open process. We'll be trying to get a better SLA around responsiveness and stuff like that. Let's see. Yeah, I'm actually kind of optimistic about a lot of where we're going with this, in that this is the licensing changes really, for better or worse, they help us, which I say. There's always a problem when your revenue and your user base come from different products. And a larger number of our user base is using Chef Server and things like that, but unfortunately there's no revenue stream. And the licensing change gives us a lot of opportunities to, it makes it easier for us to justify internally work. So I'm really kind of happy about how that's heading. Let's see, is there another slide? Yes, that's it.
Yeah. All right, so our intrepid room captain, Sandra, will be coming around with a microphone. Stick a hand up with your questions, and we can do code samples, dive into things, whatever you want to see.
Hi, I'm working on a Chef Server API client. The API doc is sort of out of date. What would be a good source to figure out what your endpoints really are? I was looking at OC Chef Pedant as a possibility. It's got nice spec tests, but I don't know if it's complete either.
That's probably the most complete testing framework. That is run every single time we build Chef Server, and that is our go, no-go test on Chef Server. So that is the definition of the API we guarantee. It also gets run against Chef Zero. So it is, as I say, the sort of, if you want a definition of the API, in some senses, Pedant is that definition. There are RAML docs in the repository that we try to keep update, but that's pretty close. So that is another source of truth if you want a more formal definition that instead of extracting it out. Stephen, did you?
Is there some place in the code that the API is implemented? I just haven't had time to go look a lot for it.
Yeah.
So I always have to end up going into Slack and looking at old Slack posts that I've pinned in order to find it. But it's Chef Server API docs, which is a little bit awkward to remember.
Is that generated from the RAML?
This is generated from the RAML.
Okay.
And so you can dig into any one of these, and it'll show you quite a bit of detail on what's expected in terms of headers and what you're going to get in terms of the response. So this is all there. Also, I guess the other thing I'd say is that the Chef client itself is the best Chef Server API client. In a way, it was originally built as a reference implementation of the Chef API client, right?
Yeah. I'll mention that the RAML source is in the Chef Server repo also. I think it's in the source Chef subdirectory, if I remember, OC Chef directory. So if there's the nice web formatted version in the web docs, but the raw source is there, and anybody who wants to make an API change will probably ask them to also RAML.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Chef's really what handles the REST API that anybody sees mostly.
Yep. The other thing, I'm going to stumble around for a second while I find it, but within Chef GitHub repo, there is all right, help me out here. There's the API client, right? No, it's all gotten refactored. There's a Chef server API right from within here that you should be able to read in order to access, yeah, server API. There we go. I'd find it eventually. And then you just kind of got to follow the turtles all the way down on all of the things that you can do with this, but you wouldn't be the first person or the last who basically accesses these things directly, like out of the Chef gem to make Chef server API calls.
So
That's cool too.
I will just mention that there are two things, this may be a little bit in the weeds, but there are two things to keep in mind outside the RAML doc. Is one, there's the signing method, which you're going to have to, either Pedant or Chef Client will help you through that. It's relatively straightforward, especially if you're only supporting the latest one and not the weird older versions. There is also, you have to put a, I can't remember, the Chef server expects a header to get in. And that's the one that bites people a lot of times. The first time they put a web request in, it doesn't have the right header, and Nginx thinks you're interactive and sends you to a web page, and that can be surprising.
Yeah, this isn't brand new code, luckily. It's stuff I'm just adding endpoints to. So.
Cool. Do you want to give a shout out to the GitHub URL for that, or?
It's go-chef/chef. We could probably use help. It hasn't been maintained in 3 years.
All right. Go chef. So if you like playing around with Go, this looks pretty cool and could use some love.
It doesn't have an organization's endpoint. It doesn't have a user's endpoint. Those are the two things I'm working on. We just added groups.
If you'd like, you can contact me on GitHub, and I can look over.
I know how to find you.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Question over here.
So does this mean, like, with these upcoming, server changes, are you going to start snipping out some of the expected behavior that dates back to the cloud-based storage for Chef Server, like being able to set, like in the set the metadata version to an array, or the description to an integer, or what have you?
I hadn't actually thought that far ahead on that, to be honest. That's not on my list right now. A lot of what we're snipping out are, the interface to things and anything that kind of gets in our way during refactors. Like some of the stuff I'm removing, our run it code was terrible because of HA stuff, and it became a lot easier once you threw away all that. And that's kind of where we are on this migration is that if it's not on fire and causing us pain, it'll probably be deferred.
I was just curious.
I'm not going to ask the question you think I'm going to ask. Are you going to put out another CloudFormation template for Chef 13 or something like that? Or is it drastically going to change from its deployment as you have the Backend list 2 version that you currently run?
Right. Well, so let me tell you a little bit about my vision for that. In the current phase, what we're trying to do is just keep the existing topology and update that for newer versions. That work kind of got put on hold with the licensing work, but now that that's done, we've started up some internal conversations about how we can do that with Amazon, maybe even as a marketplace offering, or something that's even better supported than it is today. I think moving forward, what I want to do is, just like with everything else, drastically simplify that topology down to there's just a pool of Chef Automate 2 front ends, and those are running both the Chef API and the A2 services. And so I'd love to get to that state where we've got a little bit of work to do to get there, but it'll be really cool when it happens.
All right.
Is Chef Manage going to be part of the Chef 13 in the Automate?
At this time, I'm not aware that we're planning to do a release of Chef Manage. I don't believe we're open sourcing it because it's complicated, is I guess the easy answer. So it's,
Yeah, it would just help me if it was more definitive so I could actually drive a stake through it or expect it to be supported one way or the other.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, the person who can officially make that statement is Mike Krasnow, and he was double booked. I will ask, and we will put out something about
Yeah,
that.
I've bugged him multiple times, so
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. We know there's a lot of love from customers and users to be able to view
Yeah.
those Chef objects on the Chef server with something. It would be really, really cool if there was a replacement for at least some subset of that functionality in Automate.
Yeah.
That's why I'm working on the API, so I can write the interface that like users see what they want.
Oh, cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a little Go Buffalo kind of API that, or web interface that runs and.
Yeah, well, it's REST, also a web interface, lets people look at stuff that I think I want to show.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, if anything, I could see that being a community effort that a lot of people would pile into.
I need something easier to automate inviting people or organizations to.
Right.
Our architecture looks very similar to the picture that you showed where you had the 3 back-end servers for HA. What is your recommended path forward for an architecture? Is it to keep with the three back-end servers?
Yeah. So I think there's a really simple decision tree that by asking 2 questions. The first one is, do you have access to some kind of cloud provider that you like to operate in? And the second question is are scale and high availability a requirement for your Chef infrastructure or not? And if the answer to the cloud is no, but the scale is yes, then that's what it's going to continue to look like. Right now, that's Chef Backend. In the future, that's going to be the Chef Automate cluster offering that was announced yesterday. And that's a little bit bigger in that there's 3 dedicated Postgres nodes and then 3 to n Elasticsearch nodes depending on your needs. But it's a little bit of an advancement of the architecture because it's all habitat based and latest versions of things. But yeah, essentially there's a lot of the same kind of flavors of things.
And Chef Backend is also going to stay around a little longer for sure. I mean,
Right.
until at least a bit past when that is GA.
Yeah.
We're not going to disappear that anytime soon.
But if you're in AWS, and I think soon to be Azure as well, the ability to click a button and get a Postgres and have that managed for you by your cloud provider is very, very attractive, we know, to a lot of people, and also reduces the day 1 and day 2 operations burden on all Chef server admins. So. All right.
Up front?
I have a question that I found a feature in Chef Server by looking at the Nginx logs. I found a bunch of 404s, didn't know where they were coming from. You might know where I'm going with this. There's a feature called required recipe that
Yeah.
checks the server to see if it exists, and if it doesn't, it just goes on about its day. Can you talk more about this feature? Is it documented anywhere? As far as I could tell, I had to read the source to figure out what it did.
There is
And I can't even really figure out how to set it up. So just wondering, I have use cases involving like internal
going to the
SSL
RFC?
certificates that would be really cool in orchestration. Because the question, I asked it in the Slack channel and they were like, what do you want to use that for? It was probably made for Amazon. We want to make a mini Amazon, essentially.
Yeah.
I can talk a little bit about how that feature appeared. That was actually to help support a liveness agent in AWS OpsWorks. So there is an RFC in the Chef RFC. Oh, did you find? Oh, nice.
Yeah. It's linked from the docs. That's the only way I can ever find it.
Yeah.
Again, I came in for a back channel to actually find out what it was. It was just a bunch of 404s from every single node every day.
Yeah.
Chevron was getting this path.
Yeah. And it's pretty naive the way it works because, I mean, basically, in what you do in your Chef server RB is you'd flip enabled to true and then point it at literally a single recipe file.
A
on
single
disk.
file.
Well, I was looking at that too, and from a recipe standpoint, this is not full-blown chef. This is
Right.
like,
No.
like Ruby. So it's recipe. But it's,
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is, back when we wrote it, there was a lot fewer providers out of the box in Chef Client. So as the providers get added, at least it's a little nicer of an environment. It's not well advertised because honestly, it was a very single purpose feature that wasn't necessarily fleshed out. We put it up as an RFC in part to publicly say, hey, this is what we're doing. But it definitely could use a little polish. It's not something like, the recipe is fixed in your RB, and it's not like a great deployment model yet.
I think it would be really neat to see, to get customer feedback about where to take that in the future. Like, should, maybe instead of a server-wide thing, should it be configured at an organization level
Yeah.
with an API or something like that?
well, actually, I think it is scoped to the organization. Although, to your point, the config is in first
Yeah.
for the server, but I think the path is based on organization because that was the 404 that I was getting was the node. The node would check in for the required recipe for that organization, but I don't know. Yeah, again, I didn't really play around with it, but I do have internal SSL cert issues that I have to solve at compile time, so it's in Ruby anyway. It'd be a really nice thing to just be like, you know what, that's covered in this thing that runs before Chef even gets started.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think, Rick, if you started using it, then we'd never be able to take it out, so.
okay. I guess I'll start using it.
There you go.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'd have to read the code. I wrote a big hunk. I wrote a big hunk of this, and it's no longer in my brain, and so.
The endpoint's at the organization level, but it's still a single file.
Yeah.
All.
All organizations fan into the file? Yeah, I couldn't, thanks. Thanks. That was one of the things I'd forgotten. No? No, that's great.
Right, so many of you showed up. You must have questions.
There's questions too shy to ask that puts us really on the spot. I guess this is the time to ask.
All right. Well, if there's anything else, then absolutely reach out.
Yeah.
Definitely Chef Server channel on in the community Slack. Otherwise, I know we're all looking forward to going and having some happy hour time and going to see the show tonight.
Yeah, feel free to @ me in the Chef Server channel, just so a couple times recently, things have happened in the Chef Server channel and scrolled off before I got around to it. So if you @ me, I'll go right there before it disappears.
Yep.
So.
Thank you, Mark and Irving.